The warning didn't come as a hail. It came as a target lock. 1 second, Elias Thorne was staring at the ice wall, his hand pressed against the frozen glass. The next, a red laser dot the size of a dinner plate was burning a hole through his thermal jacket, right over his heart. The air in the crevasse, usually dead silent, was suddenly screaming with the displacement of a massive object descending from the clouds. A voice, amplified by military-grade speakers that shook the snow from the canyon walls, boomed down from the black wedge of the Dominion warship hovering overhead. Subject Thorne, you are accused of tampering with a Class Omega biological hazard. Step away from the specimen and kneel for immediate sterilization. Elias didn't kneel. He couldn't. His legs were frozen in terror, not from the ship, but from what was happening beneath his hand. The ice, which had held its prisoner for 5,000 years, wasn't melting. It was screaming. A violet light, brighter than a welding torch, erupted from the core of the glacier, blinding the targeting sensors of the ship above. As the orbital cannons charged to vaporize the entire mountain range, the girl inside the ice opened her eyes. They weren't human. They were swirling vortexes of absolute zero. She didn't look at the ship. She looked at Elias, and for the first time in millennia, she spoke directly into his mind with a voice that felt like a glacier cracking. You warmed the lock, little spark. Now, watch the door break. 5 years earlier. To understand why a man would try to warm a block of ice, you have to understand the madness of absolute silence. Cryos 7 wasn't just a planet. It was a sensory deprivation tank the size of Earth. For 5 years, Elias Thorne had been the sole caretaker of Relay Station 9, a rusted, groaning needle of titanium sticking out of a planet-sized snowball at the edge of the galaxy. He had taken the job to run away from the noise of his life, the crushing debts on Earth, the failed marriage, and the small white coffin of a daughter he couldn't save. He got what he wanted. The silence here was heavy. It had a physical weight, pressing against the hull of the station like deep ocean water. His life was a monochromatic loop of grey survival. Wake up. Drink synthesized coffee that tasted like burnt copper and recycled sweat. Check the fusion reactor that groaned under the strain of -80-degree winds. Scrape the diamond hard frost off the solar arrays until his fingers bled inside his thermal gloves. The wind outside didn't howl, it screamed. It sounded like a crying child, a constant auditory hallucination that had driven the last 3 caretakers into the white madness. Elias was close to joining them. He had started naming the spiders in the corner. He had started arguing with the food dispenser. He was a ghost haunting his own life. He survived because he found the anomaly. It happened during a routine survey of the geological strata in the deep crevasse south of the station. The scanner had glitched, showing a pocket of dense organic material 20 feet deep in the permafrost. When Elias rappelled down, shining his floodlight into the clear blue ice, he almost cut his line in shock. She was there. Suspended in the prehistoric layers was a girl. She was humanoid, pale as moonlight, with hair that floated in the frozen suspension like liquid silver. To the corporation, she was just a mineral deposit, a glitch to be ignored because digging her out would cost more than the planet was worth. But to Elias, starved of human contact, she became his anchor. He called her the Sleeper. Every evening, risking frostbite and death, he would climb down into the fissure just to sit by the wall of ice. He used her as a confessor. He poured his grief into the ice. He told her about his daughter's favorite toy. He told her about the guilt that ate him alive. He cried until his tears froze on his cheeks. She was the only thing on the planet that looked like a person, and in his fractured mind, that was enough. The joke that doomed the galaxy started on his 3rd anniversary. It was a day of particularly brutal cold, where the atmosphere itself seemed to be freezing into liquid. Elias was shivering violently in his thermal suit, his teeth chattering so hard he thought they would crack. He looked at the girl in the ice. For the first time, he really saw her. Her brow was furrowed. Her hands were curled tight against her chest. Her mouth was slightly open, as if mid-gasp. She didn't look peaceful. She looked like she was suffering. She looked like she was freezing to death in slow motion. A wave of irrational, overwhelming empathy hit Elias. "You look colder than I feel, sweetheart," he muttered, his voice cracking in the dry air. Nobody should be that cold. Not for this long. On a whim born of delirium, he unclipped his spare thermal heating coil, a heavy-duty magnetic device meant to keep engine blocks from seizing in space, and pressed it against the ice wall, directly over where her heart would be. He turned the dial to maximum. "There," he whispered, patting the cold surface as if tucking in a child. "That's better. Just a little warmth. Don't let the frostbite bite." It was a meaningless gesture. Thermodynamics said the ice would absorb the heat instantly, but Elias didn't care about physics. He came back the next day, and the next. For 2 years, he fed his engine heater into the ice for an hour a day, sharing his lunch with a corpse, unaware that he was trickle-charging a god. The awakening didn't happen all at once. It started with a sound. Elias was sitting in the station, staring at his coffee cup when the liquid began to ripple. Then the floor plates rattled. Then the entire station groaned as a seismic tremor originated from the crevasse, a heartbeat deep underground that registered a 7.0 on the Richter scale. But before Elias could check the sensors, the sky tore open. The clouds above Cryos 7, usually a thick blanket of white, turned black as the Dominion Ascendancy arrived. These weren't corporation haulers. These were Predator-class destroyers, jagged wedges of black metal designed for one purpose: planetary sterilization. The sonic boom of their atmospheric entry shattered the solar panels outside. Elias scrambled to the comms console, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Unidentified vessels," he shouted, his voice trembling. "This is a civilian outpost. You are violating corporation airspace." The screen flickered, and a face appeared. It was Commander Vrax, a high officer of the Dominion. He had pale grey skin and eyes that looked like shark eyes, dead and black. He didn't look at Elias. He looked through him as if Elias were a cockroach on a pristine floor. "Civilian?" Vrax spat the word like a curse. "We detected a theta-level thermal resurgence from this sector. You, a primitive ape, have been tampering with a stasis lock that was sealed before your species learned to bang rocks together." Vrax leaned closer to the camera, a cruel smile revealing sharpened teeth. "Did you think you were being kind? Did you think you were saving a damsel? You have been feeding energy to a world eater, and now I have to burn this entire hemisphere to correct your mistake." The transmission cut. The station's proximity alarms screamed. A dropship was detaching from the lead destroyer, plummeting toward the glacier. They weren't just going to bomb it. They were sending a liquidation squad to secure the biological material. Elias stared at the screen. He should have run to the escape pod. He should have fled. But he remembered the girl's face. He remembered the 2 years of lunches. He remembered that she was the only one who had listened to him. "No," he whispered. "You don't get to kill her. Not after all this." Elias grabbed his survival gear, a laser cutter and a flare gun, and sprinted out of the airlock. The cold was shocking, instantly freezing the sweat on his back, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He slid down the icy slopes, crashing through snowdrifts, his breath tearing at his lungs like broken glass. Above him, the dropship roared, its engines melting the snow as it hovered over the crevasse. Black-armored soldiers, looking like robotic insects, rappelled down into the pit. Elias reached the lip of the crevasse just in time to see them land. He jumped, sliding down the loose scree, landing in a heap at the base of the ice wall. The heater was still there, humming, but the ice was glowing. The violet light was pulsing like a fever. The girl's eyes were open. They locked onto Elias, terrified, confused, and pleading. The Dominion soldiers raised their plasma rifles. "Target the anomaly!" the squad leader barked. "Burn it out!" Elias threw himself in front of the ice, spreading his arms. "Stop!" he screamed. "She's alive! She's just a girl!" The leader didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. The plasma bolt hissed through the air, aimed squarely at Elias's chest. And then the universe paused. The plasma bolt never hit Elias. Milliseconds before impact, the ice wall behind him didn't just crack, it sublimated. It turned instantly from solid to gas, expanding with the force of a bomb. The shockwave threw Elias to the ground, shielding him, while the superheated steam blasted the Dominion soldiers backward, slamming them into the canyon walls. Through the mist, a figure stepped forward. Lyra, the sleeper, walked out of the vapor. She wasn't shivering anymore. She stood 7 feet tall, her skin glowing with bioluminescent tattoos that swirled like galaxies. The tattered remains of her silver uniform flowed around her, knitting themselves back together with threads of light. She looked at the squad leader, who was struggling to stand. She didn't look angry. She looked hungry, not for food, but for heat. The squad leader fired again. Lyra didn't dodge. She caught the bolt of plasma in her bare hand. There was no explosion, just a hissing sound as the red energy turned violet, then grey, then vanished. She absorbed it. She drank the fire. "Impossible," the squad leader gasped, checking his weapon. "That's a gigajoule of thermal energy." Lyra tilted her head, looking at her hand. She flexed her fingers, and the air around them cracked. "More," she whispered, her voice projecting into everyone's mind simultaneously. The soldiers opened fire, unleashing a storm of laser and plasma fire. It was a feast. Lyra walked through the barrage, the energy bolts striking her skin and vanishing like raindrops in a desert. She reached out and touched the nearest soldier. He didn't burn. He froze. Instantly, his armor turned white with frost, his servos locked, and he became a statue of ice in mid-scream. She moved with a terrifying grace, a dancer of death. She snapped her fingers and the moisture in the air solidified into razor-sharp icicles that pinned the remaining soldiers to the rock face by their armor. She wasn't fighting them. She was turning their own environment against them. She was the avatar of Cryos 7, and they were trespassing in her temple. But Vrax, watching from orbit, was done playing games. "The variable is active," he announced over the comms, his voice shaking with rage. "Fire the planet cracker. Dust the site." The sky turned red. A beam of concentrated energy, thick enough to vaporize a city, descended from the flagship Indomitable. It punched through the clouds, aiming to bore a hole straight to the planet's core. Lyra looked up. Her glow flickered. She had spent millennia in stasis. She was empty. She looked at Elias, crouching in the snow. "I am hollow," she projected, her mental voice trembling with fear. "I cannot hold the sky alone. I need the spark. I need the one who waited." She held out her hand. It was an impossible choice. Touch the biological weapon and die, or let the beam hit and die. Elias stood up. He remembered the coffee. He remembered the heater. He took her hand. It wasn't cold. It was like grabbing a live wire. He felt her soul, ancient, lonely, and kind. He poured his defiance into her. "Take it," he thought. "Take everything." Lyra roared, her eyes turning pure white. She channeled Elias's will, magnifying it 1,000,000,000 times. She didn't block the beam. She reversed the polarity of the heat transfer. A violet column of absolute zero shot up from her hand, traveling up the red beam, striking the flagship in orbit. The effect was instantaneous and horrifyingly beautiful. The violet energy hit the Indomitable and flash froze the entire vessel in a nanosecond. The fusion reactors stopped. The life support stopped. The crew didn't die. They were suspended in a moment of eternal cold. The massive warship, now a glistening iceberg, drifted lifelessly in orbit, a tomb for the arrogant. The rest of the Dominion fleet, seeing their flagship neutralized by a single touch, broke formation and fled into hyperspace, terrified of the ice witch. On the surface, the wind died down. The silence returned, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. Elias sat on a rock, shaking, his adrenaline crashing. Lyra stood beside him, her glow fading to a soft, human-like warmth. She looked at her hands, then at Elias. She sat down next to him, her long legs dangling over the edge of the crevasse. "You're crazy," Elias wheezed, passing her his thermos of coffee, which had miraculously survived the battle. "You know that? You're absolutely crazy." Lyra took the cup. She sniffed it, wrinkled her nose at the chemical smell, but took a sip anyway. "It tastes like rust," she said aloud, her physical voice raspy but melodic, like wind chimes. "But it is warm." She turned to him, her galaxy eyes swirling with genuine curiosity. "Why did you do it, Elias? You are fragile. You break easily. Why did you stand between the fire and the ice?" Elias looked at the frozen ship in the sky, then at the spot where he used to sit and talk to her reflection. "Because I know what it's like to be left in the cold," he said softly, "and I decided, not today, not on my watch." Lyra looked at him for a long time. Then she leaned her head on his shoulder. It was a human gesture, learned from watching him for 5 years. "Then I shall stay," she whispered. "The Dominion calls me a weapon. You called me a friend. I will be what you need." They didn't leave Cryo 7. The corporation tried to come back, but their ships malfunctioned mysteriously every time they entered orbit. The planet was quarantined, labeled a forbidden zone. But down on the surface, a miracle was happening. With Lyra's power and Elias's engineering, they restarted the ancient planetary core. The ice began to recede. Green valleys appeared where glaciers once stood. Blue oceans melted from the permafrost. Elias Thorne, the man who ran away to die in the cold, became the gardener of a new world. And Lyra, the weapon of mass destruction, became the sun that warmed it. Years later, travelers passing the system would report a strange signal. Not a distress beacon, but a warning, broadcast in a human voice. "This world is under protection. Keep moving, or we'll leave the light on for you. The universe is cold." But one spark of kindness is enough to ignite a star.